primary deficit. So primary deficit basically, you know, it is a difference between fiscal deficit and the interest payment. Okay, so this is a, you can write it down. Primary deficit. First, you know, we will be doing three things. First, definition, implications, and then the suggestive measures. Okay, so you can write the definition. Primary deficit is a difference between fiscal deficit and the interest payment. Okay. Done, students?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you have to tell me that, ma'am, we are done. Okay. So now implications of primary. I hope everyone is done.
Yes, I'm done.
Yes.
Okay. Now moving to implications of primary deficit. Okay. So basically, what happened? Primary deficit is defined as a deficit, as fiscal deficit minus interest payment. Okay. So you don't have to write everything. It is implications of primary deficit. It indicates the amount of borrowing required to meet expenditure other than interest payment. See, this is very important. Why? Because, see, as I told you, deficit means you, for example, your budget was 100 rupees. Okay, your budget was 100 rupees, but somewhere you exceeded to 110. Now 10 rupees is something extra. So basically, primary deficit is whatever your deficit for the fiscal year minus interest payment. Interest payment is basically, for example, earlier also. For example, this is your party. You had your birthday party over here and you expended 110 rupees. So 10 rupees you took borrowing. Okay. But next year again, You had your birthday and again you spent 110 rupees. Okay, so again you have 10 rupees. This one. Earlier also you were paying for this. So for this you were paying the interest. Okay, right? So basically what happened, this is primary deficit. You are already paying somewhere the interest. You have already taken loan. But instead of that, you expended a lot, and that's why you are in the problem of fiscal deficit. Okay. So basically, primary deficit, it indicates the amount of borrowing required to meet expenditure other than the interest payment. Already you are paying interest. Other than that, how much money you need to repay? Right, already you are paying that 10 rupees, but again you, like, your deficit is for 10 rupees. So it indicates the amount of borrowing. So you need to write, you are paying one loan already, but again you need 10 rupees of borrowing in order to meet the expenditure other than interest payment. You will not include the previous loan. You will not include the previous deficit. You will only include to, like, in present time, how much money you need as a borrowing so that you can meet the expenditure. Okay, you won't be including the interest of the previous loan. Okay, it is a fresh loan. Clear, everyone? Basically, implication you will be writing, it indicates the amount of borrowing required to meet the expenditure other than interest payment. Okay, then fiscal deficit refers to the borrowing inclusive of interest payment. Primary deficit refers to the borrowing requirement exclusive of interest payment. It implies that primary deficit is zero. You don't have to write all this. See, basically over here you are getting two deficit. One is primary and one is fiscal, right? So over here fiscal deficit means amount of borrowing you require in order, including interest payment. See, when we do fiscal deficit, right, you include present deficit plus the interest payment, right, the previous one as well. But when you do primary deficit, you don't include interest payment. This is the difference between fiscal and primary. For example, if you are calculating this fiscal, okay, the formula is P equals to F minus I. So if you want to calculate this F, so basically this minus I will be going here. So it will be P plus I equals to F. So over here, if you want to calculate fiscal, you will be including interest payment. But if you want to calculate primary deficit, you will be excluding. This is a minus sign. Getting it, everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Right? Okay. So what the difference is, in primary deficit, you don't include interest payment, but in fiscal deficit, you include interest payment as well. Okay. So yeah. Okay. So for here, you will be writing, second, it implies that if primary deficit is zero, then fiscal deficit is equals to interest payment. For example, your for example, you got this formula. Okay. P equals to F minus I. Okay, this is F. So if your primary deficit is zero, right, then F minus A, then your fiscal deficit will be 0 plus I. That means your fiscal deficit will be equals to I. Just listen to this very carefully because you directly get the question over here. Okay. The formula is primary deficit equals to fiscal deficit minus interest payment. Okay. But in case your primary deficit is 0, right, in that case, your fiscal deficit will be F equals to 0 plus I. That means I equals to F. So your fiscal deficit will be equals to your interest payment. Okay. In case when your this question comes directly in exam hall, when your primary deficit is 0, your fiscal deficit will be equals to. So when your primary deficit is 0, your fiscal deficit will be equals to your interest payment. Getting this point, everyone?
Yes, teacher.
Yes,
Right?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. So you are a commerce student and I know this is a basic calculation. So I am considering you all that you are getting it. If any one of you is feeling like, ma'am, what is this? We are not getting it. Just let me know. Ma'am, can you please explain it again? Anyone? Adib, Saif, Kushi, Heba, Amos, Mariam. Anyone who is not getting this point? That, ma'am, how come it is?
No, ma'am, it's clear.
Okay. Others also?
Yes, ma'am. It's clear.
So basically what I was trying to tell you people, that you have to mention So basically what you will be writing, first point you will be writing from here and here, and here you will be writing, it implies that if primary deficit is 0, then fiscal deficit is equal to interest payment, which indicates that interest payment of previous loans have led to borrowings, right? So see, if your interest, right now your primary deficit is 0, but if your, for example, it is 0, but still there are some interest payment, that means there is no fresh loan, but in order to pay your previous loan, you have to borrow money, right? In order to pay the previous loan, you have to borrow the money. Okay. Okay. So just write it down. The implications of primary deficit, first point, and from here it implies that if primary deficit is 0.
Done.
Okay. Others done?
Ma'am, just a
Just a
minute.
minute, ma'am. Done, ma'am.
Everyone is done?
Yes, ma'am. Done.
Okay. Now we will move to measure, like suggestive measure to reduce primary deficit. Once you are in the phase of primary deficit, how will you reduce it? Okay. So primary deficit indicate borrowing requirement of the government to meet deficit other than interest payment. Okay. See, primary deficit means how much money you need in order to clear this fiscal deficit. and whatever money you need and whatever problem, whatever deficit you have apart from interest payment. Okay? So primary deficit indicate borrowing requirement of the government to meet deficit other than interest payment. So whatever deficit you have, but it should be other than interest payment, because you don't include interest payment in this primary deficit. Okay, therefore effort should be made to reduce fiscal deficit. Okay, see, primary deficit is somewhere equals to fiscal deficit, right? Therefore, but here, but the only difference between primary and fiscal deficit is fiscal deficit you include interest payment, but primary deficit you don't include interest payment. So if you want to reduce primary deficit, you should focus on reducing fiscal deficit, right? Because somewhere it is equal. So that's why primary deficit indicate borrowing requirement of the government to meet deficit other than interest payment. Therefore, effort should be made to reduce fiscal deficit. Because I'm not including interest payment, so therefore I'll be focusing on reducing fiscal deficit. And to reduce fiscal deficit, interest payment should be reduced. Therefore, repayment of loans as early as possible. See, this is a chain. Okay. Now I'll just explain you. This is a chain. How come it's a chain? See, primary deficit is equals to fiscal deficit, but you are not including this interest payment. But for fiscal deficit, you are including primary deficit plus interest payment. So if you want to reduce primary deficit, if you want to reduce it, you will be reducing fiscal deficit. Okay, and if you want to reduce fiscal deficit, you will be reducing interest payment. Got it? Because see, in primary deficit only fiscal deficit is included, but in fiscal deficit interest payment is also included. So if you want to reduce primary deficit, you need to reduce fiscal deficit, but if you want to reduce fiscal deficit, you need to reduce interest payment as well. Getting my point?
Yes, teacher.
Everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. Okay. Okay, so basically the question the same is primary deficit effort should be made to reduce fiscal deficit, and to reduce fiscal deficit interest payment should be reduced. Therefore, repayment of loan as soon as possible, so that if your interest payment is loan, you can repay the loan as soon as possible. But if your interest payment is very high, it will take a longer period of time to repay, right? But if your interest payment is less, you can repay the loan as soon as possible. Therefore, if you want to reduce primary deficit, therefore, you need to reduce fiscal deficit, and if you want to reduce fiscal deficit, you need to reduce interest payment, because as soon as you will be able to repay the loan, it will be easy for you to reduce interest payment. And if interest payment will be reduced, fiscal deficit will be reduced, and fiscal deficit will be reduced, directly primary deficit will be reduced. Okay, you can write it down.
Done, ma'am. Done, ma'am.
Others?
Yes, ma'am. Done.
Okay, I hope everyone is done.
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Safe, Adib, done.
Yes, ma'am.
So students, now you will be revising all the things like quickly for 5 minutes. All the deficit, three deficit, primaries, fiscal, and which one? Fiscal, primary, and the budgetary deficit, right? So all the three budgetary deficit you will be revising: revenue deficit, primary, and the fiscal one, and plus all the implication and suggestive measure plus the formula. Because after this we will be starting with numerical. I'm just giving you 5 minutes. Just quickly revise it. Just I'll just share you the tip to revise. Just read it loud. Okay, just give it a reading and read it loud. It will be easier for you to revise. Everyone done?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. So there is a high chances that you will get a question over fiscal deficit and primary deficit, which we discuss right now. So basically, you have to write difference between fiscal deficit and the primary deficit. Okay. First, fiscal deficit, it shows the total borrowing requirement of the government, including interest payment, and it shows the total borrowing requirement of the government, excluding. You know, primary deficit don't include interest payment, but it includes interest payment. Okay, and then it is a difference between total expenditure and total receipts, excluding borrowing. But it is a difference between fiscal deficit and interest payment. The formula, total estimated expenditure minus total estimated receipt, excluding borrowing, and the formula over here. Okay. I have to tell you one very important thing, students, that what happens sometimes over here you have written excluding borrowing, right? But in case sorry. So basically excluding borrowings. But sometimes, for example, nothing is given to you, right? So at that moment, your fiscal deficit will be equals to borrow. Okay. For example, you get a question, okay, and your the formula is expenditure and the estimated receipt, but nothing is given, not even this estimated, even the nothing is given, only borrowings is given. Then no need to search for it, no need to search for any question over there, just write it down, fiscal deficit equals to borrowing. Okay, in case you don't get these terms in the table, so you will be directly writing fiscal deficit, it will be equals to borrowing. Okay, clear? In
Yes,
case you
ma'am.
don't get any this total estimated expenditure or total estimated receipt, you will be writing this. Fiscal deficit is equals to borrow. So quickly write the difference and then we'll start with numericals. Numericals are very like one of the easiest numericals. Why easiest? Because you have to remember only three formula. One for fiscal, one for primary, and one for revenue. Right? And even the breakdown. For example, it's total expenditure, estimated expenditure. So you have already done the breakdown. Expenditure will be including. And like that, receipt are of two types, something like that. So if you remember the formula we did three formulas, and one formula we did for the breakdown as well, right? So if you remember these three formula, you can solve the question. So quickly do it, then we will move to numerical. Students done?
No, ma'am. Done, ma'am.
Others also done?
Just a minute, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'll just wait for 30 seconds more. Okay.
Done, ma'am.
Okay. So this is the question. Question number 1. So you have to answer me this. You have to follow. You have to find out fiscal deficit. Everyone quickly. Just note down the question. We will only do 3 questions. So write down this. Be very quick. Okay.
Done, ma'am.
Others? Seth will be answering
Done.
this question. Seth, are you there?
Done, ma'am.
Seth, am I audible? I think Seth just comes to class just for formality. Seth? Because whenever I call out your name, you are an like you never reply. Okay, Adab, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so Adab, can you please tell me the answer?
Ma'am, I was calculating. Just a minute.
Okay. Adit done?
Yeah, ma'am, I got the answer as 92.
Okay. What did you do, Adit?
Now
Hmm?
all the expenditure I took and the estimated receipts also.
Okay, so all the expenditure, where are all there? What is the
Then I
formula? Total.
subtracted.
Okay, total estimated expenditure, you took revenue expenditure.
Yeah, revenue expenditure and this
Where was the capital expenditure?
interest payment.
Okay, why you took interest payment? This is the formula, total estimated expenditure and total estimated receipt. Adib, you were not there in the very first class, right? Where I introduced you to the formulas.
Yeah, ma'am, I wasn't there.
That's why. Okay. You haven't watched the recording as well, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So when will you do that? Maybe tomorrow, because you don't have class tomorrow. Because
Yeah,
day
ma'am,
after tomorrow. Yeah, so day after tomorrow, you have a test of numerical. So I am expecting good marks from your end. Please watch the recordings, okay? And just I guess the first chapter, like I guess the second one. First we introduce the theory part, and second recording of this government budget, you will get the numerical portion. Or you can text me personally. I'll just share you that slide, the particular slide where all the formulas are mentioned, so that you can score well in the upcoming exam, okay, which is on Thursday. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, so Amos, just tell me the answer.
Ma'am, 52.
52. Okay, are you sure?
Yes, teacher.
Okay. Kushi?
Ma'am, I think it's 32.
Okay. Amos, you, is it 32 or 52?
52 might be a mistake.
How did you calculate that? Let me know.
Ma'am, I added all the expenditure and subtracted all the receipts.
Okay, so basically you say, okay, so receipt is of two type, right? Capital and the revenue receipt. But over here, see, expenditure is of two type, revenue and the capital. But revenue was given, but capital expenditure was not given, right? Similarly, capital receipt was given. What I told you, when total expenditure and total receipts are not given, then what you will do, your fiscal deficit will be equal to your borrowing, right?
Yes, teacher.
Right. So similarly, this question was based on that. Others also over here, see, revenue expenditure was given, but capital expenditure was not given. Similarly, capital receipt was given, but capital expenditure was not given. That's why the total part was not given. Therefore, your fiscal deficit will be equals to your borrowings. Got it, everyone?
Yes, teacher.
Everyone. Others, your answer was same or different? Let me know by unmuting yourself. Same or different? 32 or some any other trick you use?
Ma'am, I got 32.
Okay, 32. Okay, others also I guess got 32 others. If not, this was a mistake. So just repeat, don't repeat it. Okay. Why? Because in exam hall, of course, most of the time you think like capital receipt is given. Okay, 68. If a revenue receipt is not given, you take it 0. But no, no need to, assume things from your end. If total is not given, that this is in the case of only fiscal deficit, not in others case. In case you have to calculate fiscal deficit and total part is not given, total expenditure and total receipts are not given, then you will be taking fiscal deficit borrowing to equals to 0. Okay, Mariam, your was different. So got it right now? Like understood how to calculate fiscal deficit in case total is not given? Okay, great. This is very important, student. This comes for 2 marks or 3 marks, and the answer is very simple. You just have to check the columns, just check the details, and okay, no, total is not given. Definitely, it will be equals to this. Okay, and but somewhere you start calculating and all that, so it becomes difficult. Okay, now Okay. I hope this is visible to everyone. A little bit you can adjust. Everyone, is it visible? No
Yes,
need to
teacher.
write all the entries. No need to write it. Just do this. Using budget estimate of the government of India for this and this, you have to find first revenue deficit, then fiscal deficit and primary deficit. Just write down the answers. Calculate three things: revenue, fiscal and primary. All the three things you have to find it out. I'm giving you 5 minutes for this. Students done? Okay, then I will be solving it. Okay. Everyone can check it out, or you can take a screenshot of this after this, and you can do it. Okay. Is this fine?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So basically, the very first thing was you have to calculate revenue deficit. Okay. So over revenue deficit, the formula is revenue expenditure minus revenue receipt. Right. So there was a revenue expenditure in the question. You got the revenue expenditure, right? The 17th one, right? The 17th one was there, right? It was 658,119 minus, and your RR was also there. Revenue receipt was also there. Anyone who can tell me where was the revenue receipt? The very first one, right? First entry was your revenue receipt, which was basically your this. So then you will be, subtracting it to 602935. Okay, so basically your answer will be 5518184. Okay, this was the revenue deficit. Then coming to fiscal deficit, the formula was total expenditure. So your expenditure is of two types: revenue expenditure plus capital expenditure. Okay, subtracting your total, subtracting your what expenditure minus your receipt. Okay, so basically you will be subtracting revenue, receipt, and the capital receipt. Just a minute, it will be difficult for you to understand. I'll just share my screen, the answer itself. Okay, so yeah, the answer is over here. Revenue deficit. First of all, just take the screenshot of the question, everyone. Yes, Mariam, the answer was correct. Okay, I hope everyone has taken. Now we'll quickly move to the solution. So first was revenue deficit. It's very clear. Revenue expenditure was this and revenue receipt was this. Okay. Now fiscal deficit, total expenditure and total receipt. So total expenditure includes capital expenditure and revenue expenditure. You will be adding both the things and you will be subtracting the revenue receipt and the capital receipt. Okay. So basically everything was given over here, right? Capital receipt over here, right? Everything was given here and then you will be solving it. Okay, basically you don't exactly total estimated expenditure was not given. You have to add revenue expenditure and capital expenditure and then subtract. Okay, so the answer was this. Okay, next your primary deficit, which is very much obvious. Fiscal deficit, you took out this fiscal deficit, right? So you will be writing fiscal deficit over here and interest payment was given over here, right? So you will be subtracting it and your answer will be this. Okay, got it everyone?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the other question is over here. Take the screenshot along with the solution so that you can practice it out. Similarly, you have to find revenue deficit, fiscal deficit, and the primary deficit.